Oh hey YouTube, how's it going? Welcome to part 2 of the semi-arid bioactive build. Part 1, I asked you to guess what species may be going into this enclosure. One person, and I use the term person loosely because I know this person in real life, guessed. May as well have a guess if you're watching the video, guys. You might win a prize in the future if I ever have anything of any value to give away. That's a long way in the future. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed today's video. Oh, by the way, bit of merch, not mine. John's Rainforest Room, best UK YouTuber for this kind of content. He actually has proper cameras and stuff, I should imagine, the quality of his videos. Go check him out, he's brilliant. Also, see the mess up here? That is a lot of fruit fly cultures. The reason for them will become apparent in a subsequent video. But for now, let's get on with today's video. So last week we finished the background. This week we're showing what we did with the lid. We got this L profile aluminium, or for our transatlantic cousins, aluminum, you call it something else. So we got this, we trimmed it, you can see the shapes we've made. We've got 45-degree angles on the back trying to make it neat. Unfortunately, I asked someone to cut this for me and they didn't do a very good job. So we were going to make a frame and fix mesh to it, but we ended up having to try and fit the mesh to it and put the frame, build the frame on top of it. So here's Amy with a little bit of a clean up to make sure the surfaces we want to adhere things to are nice and clean, using a bit of alcohol and a razor scraper. So we got the mesh. Again, I think we got this from B&Q, big roll of it. Then we wanted to keep it taut. We couldn't really clamp the mesh down to anything, so we experimented with some different types of tape to hold it in place. Pull it taut, tape it down, pull it taut, tape it down, and then build the frame around it to hold it all in place. I think this is an aluminium mesh as well, I'm not sure, but it's the sort of metal fly screen stuff that you can get. So here we are, it's all taped up pretty much, and we just start grabbing the profile, holding it up, making sure everything sort of fits and will go nicely. To hold this down, we're just going to use some black aquarium silicone. That'll go through the mesh and hopefully create a good bond between the glass, the aluminium profile and the mesh itself. So there you see me just running a quick bead. That's the front piece down, applying pressure. Just want to get a good bond to it. Obviously we can't stand there the whole time waiting for it to cure fully, so we do get some tape and start taping it down to hold it in position. We've got a couple of side pieces to put on then. We've got a trick I realised halfway through putting this piece on was don't put the silicone on the tank, which is awkward. Put it on the profile and stick it down. Bit of a schoolboy error. The other problem was the black silicone made a bit of a mess inside, so we had to do something about that, which you'll see later on in the video. As you can see, I've smartened up here and I'm putting the silicone directly onto the profile and we're just sticking that on. It's a lot easier. So once we've all got it all on, it's tape, tape, tape to keep the pressure on to make sure there's a good bond sealed. There's a little gap because of the faults in cutting, so filled them with a bit of silicone. To be honest, it didn't look the best, but it's on top of a Viv that's going to have a shelf above it, so we weren't too concerned. So here you can see that we've adapted it a bit. We've used an epoxy to get some struts on it to give it a bit of strength, and also something to drill through to put the lights in, so you can see it's marking up the second light there. I haven't included the first light because that included all the mess ups that we did, but yeah, it's basically drill a hole for the wire to go through, and we got some nuts and bolts to hold the cage over the fixture as well. You'll see it shortly anyway. So yeah, a bit of swarf produced by this, by drilling through the aluminium, so we were hoovering up quite frequently to make sure no little sharp bits of swarf ended up in the Viv. At the end, we used Arcadia fittings and Arcadia cages. Had to sort of unwire the fixture to get the wire through the hole we made in the top and then rewire it and affix it to the top of the lid before we could move on. So in these fittings we were going to use a halogen by Arcadia and a deep heat projector as well, but for the purposes of testing we used just a normal basking spot in place of the deep heat projector, just so we could make sure it was working, we could visibly see it was on. So here's the visual check that everything was working well. Obviously both heating elements run through dimming thermostats. And here's a little insight inside. You can see the cages and the fixtures. To be honest, I would have liked to have put these fixtures outside the Viv on the top, but we didn't have room above it. The Viv just fitted a gap, luckily, that we had in the room, but there wasn't room above for the heating element, so they've gone inside, which probably help on the electricity bill. They don't have to project the heat quite as far if they're in the Viv. And there you can see all the fixtures we've made to try and keep it relatively secure and safe for the inhabitant, which is yet to be revealed. Yeah, so the bulb on the right we're keeping the halogen, the one on the left we're changing out for a deep heat projector at a later date. So once we knew all that was functional, we needed to tidy things up, so we used a cutting board and a Stanley blade just for cutting the wire mesh. You have to be careful with this mesh, it is sharp once you cut it. So we were going around just removing the excess, trying to cut it as closely as we could so no little wires would be sticking out. Unfortunately a few did, but here we see Amy using one of my aquascaping tools just to push the wires in on itself a bit. You can see the stray wire there. Again, it's not too much of a problem as it's tucked away on top of the Viv, but just to try and make things a little safer. To keep all those loose wires in place, I just run a bead of silicone along the front edge there and underneath the box section on the sides, just to try and tie them all in, because like I said, they are sharp. They will make you bleed if you catch yourself on them. So this was just a little safety measure I did, just for us really, rather than the animal, for when we're servicing or moving the tank around at all. And adding a little bit to fill in the gaps that were left due to the poor cutting. So because it was quite messy inside when you could see the silicone holding the alley in place, I got some L profile black plastic. So this is to go on the inside. We'll silicone this into place, and that should hide the mess that we made fitting the frame on the top. So that's me just cutting a 45-degree angle. I had to go and buy a mitre block for this. Very annoyed. A hacksaw. Probably should have done that with the aluminium profile myself to make the lid in the first place. So that's Amy just putting the back piece and the side piece in. Once we got them siliconed in, we got other pieces of profile and what we had lying around to try and apply pressure to allow the silicone to cure and to give it a good bond and a good seal again. There's some clamps holding one section in, and I'm reasonably happy with the result that we attained, hiding the mess we'd made previously. There's a bit of tidying up with the silicone once it was in, but we got there in the end and it looks pretty good now. So during this build I had queries on how I was going to plant it out, but luckily Serpa Design did a video, I think with a Cali King snake, which was digging things up. So we've got, semi-arid environment, but I wanted some moister, yeah, that works, moister areas that I could plant into. So we got these pond baskets as per Serpa Design. Got some weed fabric, hot glued that in position, filled it up with a substrate mix that could retain moisture better than the overall substrate we're using in the Viv. Got some plastic mesh which we attach with small cable ties all the way around. Pretty tedious, but trying not to leave a gap big enough where the snake could get underneath the mesh. But even so, once we've done all that, as you can see, quite a lot of cable ties. On the corners we've still got a gap, as you can see here. So we were a bit worried, oh, I've let slip that it's a snake, that the snake could get under there. So Amy very cleverly adapted the design and put a bit of hot glue on the corners just to seal them up. Once folded up, it makes quite a neat job, as you can see. So all we have to do then is do that to all 4 corners and snip around all the excess mesh that we've got and the excess bits of the cable ties. Just being careful that we don't have any sharp bits. So we're cutting a slit in the mesh in order to allow for planting. This is a ficus benjamina that we're putting in. It can go fairly dry, so it'll need watering every few days, perhaps water it 2 or 3 times a week, not excessively. And then we use the cable ties to sew up the slit that we just planted through to try and keep the hole small enough that the snake can't get under the mesh. So here's a close-up of us doing it. Quite fiddly, using really small cable ties and essentially just stitching it up with keeping the gap nice and tight. This was done a few weeks ago and the ficus benjamina here seems to be doing quite well, but some of the grasses that we used don't seem to be faring as well, so we may have to replant them at a later date. So this is the Viv. We've got a mixture of topsoil, bearded dragon, substrate from Pets at Home, I think it was, and play sand all mixed together for the main bulk of the substrate. And here's the start of our cleanup crew going in. I've been saving things from live foods over the months. That's a Morio worm beetle going in. It's probably the biggest species that we're using in here as cleanup crew. This is a collection of dermastids. They're collected from the cricket tubs. If you don't know what dermastids are, they're the little beetles that come from the woolly bears, the hairy little caterpillar looking things that are in with your live foods quite often. They tend to eat dead flesh. They're good for stripping carcasses of meat if you want to do something with the bones, but they're pretty good in a dry, arid vivarium as cleanup crew. Here's a few mealworm beetles and mealworms we're chucking in as well. We're varying what we're using from the norm, i.e. isopods and springtails. Springtails seem to be doing quite well under the water bowl. I don't spill much water, but they seem to be able to exist under there. And the powder blue isopods I put in there, they seem to be doing okay too. We see them quite frequently. I did put some giant orange isopods in there. They didn't fare so well. I think I've seen one dead one, so I wouldn't recommend them necessarily. There's several species of isopods you could try, but I'm quite happy that I've got a good mixture of species in here. Also, I added some Morio worms at a later date. So here we see the new inhabitant just after he was put in there. This is Steve, full name Steve Alf Stewart Bunyip. And Steve is a spotted python, Latin name Antaresia maculosa. He's fully grown, he's an adult, he's 5 years old, and we absolutely love him. His temperament is good. We had a little bit of a problem with getting him to feed when he first got here. I think he was stressed out, but now he feeds regular as clockwork. And he's absolutely beautiful. Love the markings, love the body shape of him. He's not going to be a big snake. This is as big as he gets. I'm not into big snakes, so that ruled out getting anything bigger than a boa. I think is excessive for me personally. And I'm not into morphs, which rules out a lot of the royals. And I find royals, they look disproportionately chunky to me, whereas this guy looks fantastic. We're all really happy with him. Just look at him there. Absolutely stunning animal. So hopefully I'll do a video on spotted pythons in the near future as well. But this is just a little introduction to, I suppose, the first snake for Tim Reptile. So that's about it, folks. Hope you've enjoyed. If you have, please like, subscribe, leave a comment underneath. And we'll see you again soon. Take it easy, YouTube. Thanks for watching.